Northborough. I'm a lip reader. So.
Hello. Welcome to our Northborough School Committee open meeting of December 1st, 2021. Hello, everyone. The time is 6:31. I'm going to call us to order. Keith LaBelle, Erin Tagliaferri, Kelly Gannett, myself, Lauren Bailey-Jones, are all in attendance, and Joan Frank is absent. So welcome to our December meeting, and we're going to start it off with audience sharing. So I'm curious if anyone in the audience would like to share tonight. Any takers? All right, we'll move on to new business. So tonight, our first order of new business is a principal's report. And we're excited to hear from Amy Souls from Z School. So thank you, Principal Souls, for being here this evening. Mr. Martineau, do you have anything to add?
No, welcome, Amy, and thank you for presenting on behalf of your colleagues.
Thank you. Nice to see everybody. I'll start with an update from Milliken, hot off the press from Principal Park. Jennifer Lipton O'Connor, the District Social Emotional Learning Coordinator, led staff and professional development that helped frame our SEL work for the year. As a result of that training, many staff members incorporated social emotional learning plans into their professional goals for this year. In the weeks leading up to Thanksgiving, our World of Difference peer leaders engaged in 18 hours of training through the Anti-Defamation League. 30 7th and 8th graders participated in activities and lessons designed to equip them with necessary skills to lead future discussions and activities with our students about topics including inclusion, bias, prejudice, and diversity. More details to follow in the coming months. December is a busy month at Milliken. Our interscholastic basketball tryouts are taking place this week. This is especially exciting because we were not able to have basketball last season. We have 3 games scheduled before vacation. In addition, there are several winter concerts that will be taking place over the next 2 weeks. Tuesday, December 7th is our grade 7 winter concert being held at Algonquin. Wednesday, the 8th is the grade 8 concert at Algonquin. Thursday, the 9th is the 6th grade winter concert at Algonquin. And Monday, the 20th is their evening of song at Milliken. All concerts begin at 7 and are limited, the number of guests are limited to 2 per student. Auditions for the school musical, high school musical, will take place the week of the 13th. As has become a December tradition at Milliken, our Holiday Helpers initiative is underway. They are collecting monetary donations to support Northborough Helping Hands. And for the elementary schools, the month of November began with a professional development day. The elementary schools benefited from a 4-school virtual session with Jennifer Lipton O'Connor. We began the day with an exploration of the CASEL framework and how it related to ourselves and our students. Later, we took time to compare the competencies and match them to existing and future lessons. At Z, our afternoon was spent taking the essence of the competencies to structure and strengthen our readiness skills for our school safety drills. November 9th and 10th were dedicated to parent-teacher conferences. Families were offered the option of virtual or in-person time with teachers, and conferences were well received and attended. Both teachers and families left feeling more in tune about their child and student strengths and areas for growth. During both the November professional development and conferences, our ESPs spent time with Megan Kelty. She provided them direct instruction in the areas of sight word reading, phonics, phonological awareness, Project Read, and brought them through the new Massachusetts Literary Guidelines in order to better support our students. The month of December, each of the elementary schools are utilizing one of our staff meetings to highlight our work with digital literacy and computer science standards. We are partnering with Julie Doyle and are building digital literacy representatives to move this work forward. Our professional learning communities are in full swing. All of our PLCs are focusing on data collection methods, analysis, and the development of targeted instruction. We've been supported by both Megan Kelty and Kathy Lazat in this work as we target math for grades 3 to 5 and readings in grade K to 2. Some highlights for students beyond learning have been our attention to school culture, related themes, and community spirit. Each building engages in food drives, spirit days, and themed celebrations, and/or lessons related to cultural awareness. This past month, our schools engaged in read-alouds and activities highlighting Native American Heritage Month.
Thank you so much, Principal Souls. Any questions or comments? Kelly?
I have a question, and you might not know the answer to it, but are all the concerts always at Algonquin for the middle school, or is that just because
I
of?
don't know the answer to that.
Okay, I don't know.
So, yes, so they're typically at Algonquin
Okay,
for the Pelican concerts.
for the things. It's just they're not usually limited to the things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments for Principal Souls? Thank you. We really love that you updated us on what all the elementary schools and the middle school are doing, and it sounds like it's a busy time of year. You're in the full swing of everything. It was great to hear that you are celebrating Native American History Month as well. So,
And I missed the backside of Principal Carp's note. Our ski club returns this year, the Wachusett Ski Club, after a hiatus. So the first scheduled trip is Tuesday, January 4th. And then finally, she adds, in an effort to support mental health of her staff, her PTO is funding after-school yoga next week for interested staff members. They will consider to offer this in a future based on staff interest.
excellent. Thank you so much, Principal Souls.
Thank you.
So nice to see you. Our next item of new business is a legislative update. So there's no new updates at this time unless something new has come to us.
No new updates.
Okay, perfect. And so then that brings us to our MASC-MASS joint conference recap. So I served as the delegate this year for the delegate assembly, and there were 9 resolutions. All resolutions were approved by the delegate assembly. It was quite a different conversation compared to last year. There was very little debate and discussion. We were done in a little over an hour. Last year it was probably closer to 4 hours.
Yeah.
So,
I remember that.
I think everyone was just on board with all of the resolutions. The one that I think was talked about the most had to do with eco-friendly buses, and really talking about our bus providers and the hardships that going electric may pose for them. And so that was probably one of the heaviest topics of conversation, but it was pretty smooth sailing. But if anyone has any questions about any discussion about the resolutions, there is a link to that recording, or I can give you more details. Okay? Great.
I didn't like the virtual conference.
You did it?
I wasn't a fan.
Oh, I really enjoyed it.
I didn't like the things I didn't like about it is that, like, and I guess when you're there, you're always trying to juggle multiple things also, but it was more of like the technology type of issues that
There were a lot of
came up that-
glitches.
That was unfortunate. And then I think it would be nice if they had it again virtual, but for the same price. I just feel like you're not getting, really the full experience, and to have it be the same price as if you're there and stuff. I thought it was unfortunate for that.
There were
but-
quite a few technical glitches. Dr. Bentz gave a presentation, and I could not access it. I tried for about a half an hour, and
I know, that's what
Unfortunate.
I saw the email that they just posted all the things, so
Yes,
I'm hoping to
yes.
like go back now and seeing like if anything maybe somehow fixed or got posted that I missed, but,
so all of the sessions will be posted to the MASC website as well. So even if you didn't attend, you can go back and watch any of the sessions. Anything else you wanted to share, Kelly?
no, that was, I mean, as I said, I love the conference in general. I love all the information, I love meeting the new people, and the lectures and the talks are usually so great, so that's why it's unfortunate when you can't,
Right.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to move on to item number 4 under new business, which is an MCAS presentation. So, Mr. Martineau, I'll pass it to you.
Sure. So this evening, Dr. Reinhorn will provide a spring 2021 MCAS update with the results. And I think that as we look at the assessment data, it's essential to understand the context in which MCAS was provided. That the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education decided to move forward with the assessment for the purpose of diagnostic and not necessarily accountability. So it's been very helpful information for us as a district, and Dr. Reinhorn will provide an overview and answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share these results. First, I'll give a little bit of context about the assessment and our students, and then walk through an overview of the different areas and the results. So the Massachusetts MCAS, kids have lots of different definitions of what that acronym stands for, but it actually stands for the Massachusetts Comprehensive Assessment System. And the purpose is to provide clear, actionable information to the whole community, not to families, to community members, to educators, to the state, to be able to make decisions. And it is an important indicator for us and a set of information, but we also always remind ourselves that it is one of many sources that informs our work. So some updates for, as Mr. Martineau said, this was a pretty particular context. So MCAS in 2020 was canceled. MCAS in 2021 was modified, and the modifications included students being randomly assigned to different sections of the assessments in order to reduce the amount of testing time. So, for example, 2 students in a class might be taking section 1 while another might be taking section 2 of the math assessment. And it was a sampling technique for them to be able to get good data widely, but it means that for an individual child, each child was not necessarily taking the exact same assessments. They had an extended administration timeline so that people had more leeway as to when they gave the assessment. We were allowed to remotely administer the assessment to students who were still in a remote model. There were some adjustments made to the way student growth percentiles were calculated. Importantly, as Mr. Martineau mentioned, DESE was clear up front and have stayed consistent with this, that they did not issue updated district or school accountability determinations based on the results from 2021. In Northborough, we did use computer-based testing, and our participation rates remained very high. They were very consistent with past years, 98%, 98%, and 97% respectively for ELA, math, and science. Before we look at the results, I thought it was helpful to just remind ourselves of who our students are. We have, you can see in the top left corner, just the enrollment year by year from 2019 to 20 to 21, and it's fairly consistent. So despite sort of the ideas that people had about lots of people were going to kind of leave the district during the pandemic, we actually were fairly consistent in our enrollment. And the pie graph is, I think, a helpful representation of the racial and ethnic makeup of our student body. 71% of our students is the green section, which is our students who identify as white, and that then means that we have a lot of other different designations that add up to 29%. And you can see some more information on the right-hand side.
What's, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
The high needs section, the second bar thing, so what are those on the left, the second?
Right over here.
Yeah, what is that section?
So that is just, again, the sort of describing the population, what percentage of the students are in the category defined as high needs, which are students with disabilities, which are in economically disadvantaged,
Okay.
and which are defined as English language learners.
Okay, gotcha.
And those are all using DESI's definitions for each of those categories. And then those are also, that means ways that we can disaggregate the data.
Okay.
Because for anything that we have designations, we can then say, so as long as the subgroup is large enough, we can say, what does the data look like for those subgroups?
Thank you.
Sure. So just as a reminder, in terms of how MCAS is scored, in 2017, when we began the next generation MCAS, the scoring, really the names of the categories changed. And at the same time, there was also an effort to make it a little bit more rigorous to meet that bar of meeting expectations. And so there was, an adjustment both in terms of what does it take to meet expectations, and then there were also some changes in the naming of the categories. So first we'll look at English language arts from a few different perspectives, then math, and then science, technology, and engineering. So the first, what you're looking at here is an achievement distribution year by year. So this is showing us what percentage of our students in grades 3 through 8 aggregated were in each category for the achievement categories that we just had here for each year. So the blue on the left is exceeding expectations, green is meeting, that orangish is partially meeting, and red is not meeting expectations. And obviously there is nothing for 2020. Overall, often we talk about the meeting and exceeding together. So what percentage of our students met or exceeded the benchmarks. And if you look at 2019, we had 66% of our students met or exceeded expectations. And in 2021, in English language arts, 60% met or exceeded. So it's important to remember when we look year by year that we're comparing different kids. Those are different cohorts of kids. It's still a helpful indicator, and 6% is not a huge jump in that. This graph is looking at growth. We're still looking at English language arts. We're still looking at 3rd through 8th grade in the aggregate. And what you have is the star, it represents the state. The x-axis, so going across the bottom, is the student growth percentile, the average student growth percentile, which I'll say a little bit more about in a minute. And going on the y-axis, the vertical axis, you have the percent of students that are meeting or exceeding expectation. So the student growth percentile is a measure of how much growth a student has achieved relative to students who are a similar cohort to them. So it's comparing them to other students who scored similarly to them in the past. So for the state, what that means in parentheses 35.8 is that for the state, the mean student growth percentile was 35.8. And the average achievement, 46% of the students in the state were meeting or exceeding expectations. So Northborough in the aggregate for ELA is at a higher level of achievement at 60% meeting or exceeding, but a slightly lower level of growth is what this graph shows in the aggregate.
Can I just pause to see if anyone has any questions so far?
So the growth, so that's an overall growth, like over time, accumulative, basically?
It is
or
the
growth in?
It's the growth comparing back. It's typically the way growth works is that if it were 2019 it would be comparing to a similar group of students in 2008 who scored similarly in 2018
Okay.
and saying, well, we were all pretty similar in 2018. How much did each of those similar students grow to 2019?
Okay.
And then they create a percentile and say, if you're in the 50th, if your growth percentile is 50, it means 50% of the kids grew less than you,
Okay.
and the others grew more than you.
So would this be kind of like how on the previous chart, you know, you said it was like a 6%? Would that be kind of like, is that why it's less growth, or no, or is that those completely different? Like it has
No,
nothing-
it's different
Different
because
okay.
this is your like raw achievement.
Okay.
Like it's how well did you do? Because if you think about it, right, somebody can have very high achievement, and then their growth may not be as high because they may be sort of maintaining.
Mhm.
Whereas somebody might start very low and they're going to be compared to other people who also started low. And if they end up very high, they're going to have a very high growth percentile because they have grown a lot more than other people who started low.
Okay.
So there are two different ways of measuring what happened in the assessment. And they tell different stories, and together I think are important, but are different.
Thank you. Any more questions? Thank you, Stephanie.
Sure. And feel free to jump in at any point because it's a lot of information. So this is still English language arts, and it's still growth percentile. It's broken out by grade, and it is comparing it to what our growth percentile, our average growth percentiles were in 2019. There is no growth percentile for our fourth graders in 2021 because they did not take it in 2020. So there's nothing to compare back to. And as you can see, our growth percentiles are lower than in 2019. And if we look further back, 2019 was fairly typical for what we have historically, and this year was lower, which is consistent with the state, as you saw in the previous graph. So in mathematics, I'm going to go through the same three views of the data. So first, in terms of achievement. So again, we're looking at the aggregate of 3rd through 8th grade. And this is what percentage of students were in each score range in the exceeding expectations, meeting expectations, and partially meeting. If we look at the meeting and exceeding, in 2019, we had 64% of our students were meeting or exceeding. And we, in 2021, have 51% of our students. And you can see, I think the visual is really helpful here, that you can see that we have, our yellow bar is taller, our green bar is shorter. So you can see that shift. Again, they're not the same students that we're comparing, but it's still helpful information. In terms of growth, this is our aggregate for math, student growth percentile. The state is at 30.4 for the mean student growth percentile, and 33% of students in the state were meeting or exceeding in mathematics. And this is, again, aggregating 3rd through 8th. And for us in Northborough, our student growth percentile mean was 33.6, and we had 51% of our students meeting or exceeding, which is consistent with what we just saw in the bar graphs. It's just a different representation. And then this is looking grade by grade at our student growth percentiles. So again, I would say that 2019, when you look back historically, is fairly representative of past years. And so 2021, does represent less growth in terms of our average student growth percentile.
So my question is about this slide and the slide 11. So is this being seen across the state through a lot? Do you think it's because of the way that they did the testing? Like not all kids had the same test, half the kids, as you said, like took one section, the other kids different section and things like that. So do you think that's why there's such like a drop in areas?
In the growth
Mhm.
or in the achievement or both?
Yeah.
I think that it's probably less about that aspect of the test. Like, I think what I would caution people is if you're looking at your own child,
Mhm.
at an individual child, then yes, that could be a real factor at the
Okay.
level of an individual child as
Okay.
to sort of what part of the test did they take.
Mhm.
I think when we look at larger numbers,
Mhm.
it's probably more indicative, and this is why they gave the MCAS,
Mhm.
is that it is probably more indicative of the impacts of the pandemic.
Okay.
Right? And there's lots of possible
Mhm.
explanations, but it's probably not indicative of the format of the testing
Okay.
so much. Although, there's a lot about the testing that could be explanatory as well.
Mhm.
In terms of like some kids were remote, some kids were in person.
Mhm.
It was just challenging at best. Yes.
It would be interesting to see, especially, the 8th grade student growth percentile really stands out, I think, the most. Be interesting to see the rates of students who were remote, taking this test remotely versus in person, to see whether there was a difference and, perhaps be able to extrapolate some of the data and say, okay, look, we had this percentage of our 6th graders taking the test remotely. Do we see any differences between, say, 6th graders and 8th graders? So that would be some interesting data to look at as well. I don't know if you've taken a look at that data.
We have, and interestingly, in general, the growth was higher for students who took the test remotely. However, it's really hard to parse out what that means.
Mhm.
We could also look at who was still remote. What were the circumstances for testing remotely? There's just so many different factors. So it is something interesting to look at, and we have been taking a look at. But it is, as with any of these things, we have to then triangulate, because it's hard to draw conclusions from the single data point.
Absolutely.
In terms of what that means. Yeah.
Thank you.
Lots of new ways to slice the data.
Could I just add, a question we asked from one year to the next and comparing either growth or achievement, what was different?
Mhm.
If we see a change. And I think those are the types of questions we're asking is, what was different, what was impacting students? And to your point, it's definitely a lot, for many kids.
Yeah. We also, we had differences in terms of like what it meant to be hybrid. Didn't mean the same thing for all kids. There were some kids who were hybrid in here for 2 days, and there were some kids who were hybrid in here for 4 days. So there's just a lot of different ways to slice the data and considerations.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So science, technology, and engineering. This assessment is not given to every grade. So when we were looking at the others, they're given in 3rd through 8th grade. This is given in 5th grade and in 8th grade. And the assessment, the updated assessment, in 2018, they were still giving the legacy MCAS. And so we have those results as well, but they're not using the exact same achievement levels. So that's why they're not on the graph with us. So in 2019, the percentage of students who were meeting and exceeding was 69%. And in 2021, it was 61%. So it's, fairly consistent. Whoops. Oh, and, sorry, that's correct. There is no growth percentiles for the science because they need that previous year cohort to compare to. One thing I wanted to point out about the science that I think is interesting is when we dig deeper into the science, technology, and engineering, the achievement was quite steady in 8th grade, and more of the drop that you see is represented is from 5th grade. And that, to me, seems fairly logical that we would expect that, in the sense that our 8th grade students had their science teacher and their science class, and that's what those teachers teach, and so they still had that same experience to some degree. Whereas our 5th grade, I think, in the sort of juggling of hybrid and remote, science is one of the areas that was challenging with the hands-on aspect of science. And for the elementary teachers who teach all of the subjects, there was, they themselves as educators were juggling more things, in addition to the fact that 5th grade science assessment is cumulative of all of the elementary years. And so the 5th grade science teachers typically do a lot of revisiting of science topics from the previous grades prior to the MCAS. And with the ways that we were trying to really focus in on power standards and essentials, there was less opportunity for that revisiting of prior years' topics. So that would not be entirely surprising to us in those results. So how do we use the MCAS results? At the school level and at the teacher level and at the district level. So at the district level, we have lots of analyses looking and disaggregating the data, looking at performance by subgroups, and all these different ways we've been talking about that we can slice it. At the school level and at the teacher level, teachers are looking at item analyses to inform curriculum decisions and instructional decisions, and looking even at the individual level, with the caveat that we've already talked about, which is that this is one data point. And so while we can use this to help us to identify students who might be in need of either extension or might be in need of additional support, we're always triangulating and then saying, okay, what do we learn from this data? And now what's the next set of data we need to look at that we need to get a more complete picture? An important aspect of our how we use the MCAS even more than ever right now is that even when we see MCAS as a measure of academic achievement and academic growth, we recognize that it's not always just academic barriers. And so sometimes it's a flag for us to say what else is going on and looking at those non-academic barriers as well. In terms of implications, and what else is going on in the district related to this, we, as you know, we have used many different assessments for years in the areas of ELA and math, but this year we have universal screeners in ELA we'll be starting them very soon in pre-K, but in K through 2, we have the DIBELS 8th in the literacy, along with the other assessments that we use. And in math, we have fluency assessments and the Envision math assessments that are used across all classes and all grades. In middle school, we have reading inventory screeners, and at Millikan this year, they have been starting to use the DIBELS screener as well. And all of these assessments are used to make decisions about tiered intervention, and both in the classroom and in pull-out situations, and determining what are the supports that are needed and how do we best address those needs. We also are using this data to inform some of the ways that we're using the ESSER funding around addressing what ESSER, I think, refers to as learning loss. and pandemic impacts, and we're focusing on the area of mathematics, which is supported both in the MCAS data and in additional data. We're also in the process of, as you heard in the updates from Principal Souls, building shared understanding around the CASTLE framework for social emotional learning, and looking to identify an SEL screener that will help us to have data, baseline data about our students' social emotional well-being. And finally, with the addition of Jennifer Lipton O'Connor and Megan Kelty, and with Mary Coakley playing a role with math leadership, in addition to Kathy Lazat, along with all of the directors that have been here longer term, the teaching and learning team has been meeting regularly and really looking at all of these connections across all of the different areas, and the ways that the MCAS informs and the programs and initiatives that are in place. And I am happy, this is just highlighting the ways it connects to our Vision 2026, which are kind of embedded in what I've said. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes, Keith.
Thank you for the presentation. Just one quick question. Will Mass Insight use our MCAS data as part of their equity audit, among many other things, you know?
That is a great question. We have given them, I do believe
Publicly
they
available,
are.
isn't it?
I'm not sure if they will use 2000 and the results that Stephanie presented, but historical data they've accessed.
Generally, okay.
Yeah, and they have access to this, so I won't be surprised if they don't use it.
Anything
Thank
else?
you. That's it for me, thanks.
All right. Erin or Kelly?
Good. No, thank you.
I asked mine along the way.
Still digesting that?
I said I asked all my questions along the way, so.
I had a quick question, Stephanie, about
Sure.
the participation rates. Besides a parent opting their child out of taking the test, is there any other reason a child would not take the MCAS?
Well, there are some students who have alternative MCAS, take an alternative assessment. And I suppose it is possible that someone could be absent
That's true. as well.
enough to, I mean, I think it would take a lot of absences because there is a lot of opportunity for makeups, but I
Okay.
can't think of another.
Okay, so that like 2% would be an opt-out rate, essentially?
Probably.
Okay, thank you.
Most part, yeah.
Thank you so much for your presentation tonight, and thank you for sharing about the student growth percentiles. I know that's something that Joan was asking about. So it was great for all of us to hear more about how those are calculated and to see all of those results in the data. Thank you so much.
And I think you just said, I'm sorry, about
Yeah.
the opting out thing. And it was something that I learned from you, I think, before that. Some people think like, oh, opting out, that doesn't affect the school districts. But it does in the sense because we take a 0, right, for those
Correct.
students?
There's technically not an opt-out option for families.
Yeah.
So if a student does not take the MCAS,
Mhm.
it is reported as
A 0.
A 0 for the district, yeah.
Okay.
So.
Well, thank you. We're going to move on to our next item of new business, which is a discussion surrounding the extended day program.
Sure. So I have a very brief update around the Northborough Extended Day Program. Their 3-year contract ends at the end of in June, and we do have a couple of options as a district. One option is to put out a request for proposals for extended day care, which basically is a competitive bid process. That is one option. The other option is to give a 1-year licensing agreement to extend their contract another year. And at this time, that is the pathway that I'm recommending, just for continuity and stability of the after-school care program for our students. And then we would take a formal RFP process up in 22, in the fiscal year 23. So just a brief update. And
Thank
I'd be
you.
happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I do have a question. How have school start times impacted the extended day program?
Great question. I mean, I think that part of our collaboration and work preparing for the change of start times was working with the extended day program, so they knew well in advance and made the adjustments. I think they've been a great partner and adjusted accordingly.
Correct.
And I don't think I think their adjustments have been made and haven't impacted families, to my knowledge.
The only other thing I would report along that line is there are families that continue to go in and out of the program. I have heard of a couple of additions as of late, which has impacted buses, like where they get dropped off and things of that nature. But overall, they were, when we made the 5-minute adjustment, that worked well. Like those things that have happened have been, beneficial.
Okay.
So
Great.
no detriment.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you. All right. So that means that we are going to. Let's see. Okay. Yes, we're into old business now. So we have a COVID update. So that means that Mary Ellen will be coming to the table with our usual update. Thank you, Mary Ellen.
Someday she'll be at the table presenting about something other than COVID. So.
Greg's in charge of
He's driving.
presentation. So, I was asked to give like a COVID update, the numbers, what's going on, so here we go. Buckle up. Our positive cases, this is from the beginning of the year. The red is this year, the blue is last year. So you can see our case counts are higher. We've been in school more, full time. So the first 3 weeks there, we were remote still, I think. So this is not unexpected, but there have been a lot of cases. Our vaccination rates, we have had 5 vaccine clinics for our 5 to 11-year-olds in both Northborough and Southborough. Our 6th one is Friday. Erin's been busy at all of them. So we do not have any fully vaccinated K to 5th graders yet, or 5 to 11-year-olds yet. I guess 6th grade part would be included in this too, so sorry about that. I can get you those numbers, but I didn't put them in this chart. I apologize. But, and the reason for that, although some of them have received their second vaccine, it's not 2 weeks after their second vaccine. So nobody is considered fully vaccinated in 2 weeks after their second vaccine. So this is about 47% of our Northborough students are partially vaccinated right now.
Is that just from the clinic you ran, or is that knowing if people did private ones too?
This is information from the Massachusetts Immunization Information System, which pulls in from the private ones too.
Okay.
Not to say that it's 100%, but this is what we have. So then our testing, our Binax Now antigen testing programs, which is the test and stay or for symptomatic diagnostic testing at schools. In the test and stay, since the beginning of the year, we've had 331 individuals participate. We've performed 1,354 tests, and we've had 4 positives. So those would be people who are considered close contacts. The symptomatic testing, we've had 87 unique individuals, performed 114 tests, and 6 of those have been positive. And then our weekly COVID safety checks, finally, after months of hounding Veritas to be able to extrapolate some of this data, this past week was able to do that. Good thing we had a 5-day weekend so we could work on that. But so these are the numbers of what we've had for our COVID safety checks or pooled screening. Milliken, it's about a 26% participation rate for students. Lincoln Street is about 50%. Peasley is about just about 50%. Proctor is 35%, and Z is about 47%. So of the student participation in that. From this past week, that was just this past week, we had 3 positive pools in Northborough, K-8 schools. And then this information, a lot of information is always available on the district dashboard. We have the daily that's available on the website. We have the daily positive case count up here. We've changed the look of the dashboard a little bit because people didn't realize that was a live link. And so that is updated daily, and it was at the request of the medical advisory team. It's historic. That all those there goes back 7 days. So the history of what the daily case counts were. And the dashboard has a lot of information on it that you can, it's updated by Thursday morning every week, so we'll have new updates. It has the case counts for the past 4 weeks, what it's been year to date, our vaccination rates. Now we'll be able to add in K-5 in here too, and then our testing, the town data, and then the state data. So there's a lot, and then some frequently asked questions for the information down the bottom there. Sorry, Greg, I'm scrolling through and you're just like you guys are seeing what I'm seeing. But there is a lot of information on the district dashboard. If you ever go there and something's wrong, please let me know. Sometimes I forget to add, and it's a little bit off. The numbers are a little bit off. But so the top thing is the link, Greg, where the district dashboard. If you want to jump that. But I'm open to any questions. If anybody would like to ask any questions about all of that.
Anyone?
I love it that it's up to date. I love that you have the daily feature. I didn't know that it was there too. I knew before tonight, but at first in the beginning I didn't know, because I remember people were talking about it and they were like, oh, well, look at the daily one. And we're like, where's the daily one? It's like right there. It says daily. So I was one of those.
A little bit, so.
Yeah, I was one of those people like, oh, you can click on that? Oh, I didn't know that. But it's great. I'm glad to see some are vaccinated, are getting vaccinated, the K through 5. Do you know, did we use all of the ones that the state gave us for the 2, I think you did, what, 2, would you get like 600 or 900 for the 3 towns?
Oh, for the towns?
All the vaccines?
I'm not sure they use close to all of it.
I think so.
But they are able to, but they didn't mix up, they're probably going to do, they're looking at doing a few more smaller clinics.
Mary Ellen, thank you very much. I know a lot of people look at that dashboard all the time. It's really nice to see the transparency in our community, just that everyone is sort of on the same page and understands, what's going on. So we really do appreciate it.
Can I ask one question or suggestion? I got a lot of questions doing the clinic as far as what changes now. So I don't know if maybe putting together like a quick fact sheet for these elementary kids. A lot of parents were saying, do they still do the weekly pooled testing if they're fully vaccinated? Just a lot of questions about what's going to change now. So maybe just a very quick thing about, you can still, nothing. I didn't know if they were allowed to still participate in pool testing, should they not participate? There was just a lot of questions like that. Are they going to be identified if they're a close contact? Are they not going to? Just a lot of general questions and a lot of the same question. So that may be helpful to just a quick bullet,
We'll add something somewhere on there.
something somewhere.
And Greg will probably send something out in
Yeah, I think there was just kind of that sense of like, we did this, now what?
Mm-hmm.
Does anything change? And I just got a lot of the same questions, so that might be helpful for people.
I think it's a great point because it does change in terms of, some of the protocols that are in place. And I will share, and Mary Ellen and I talk about this often, that in grades, 7 through 12, we are seeing less cases than we are seeing in grade 6 and below. So the vaccinations from our standpoint are impacting our ability to offer in-school, in-person learning and bring continuity. So we're hoping in the next, many weeks the more families take advantage of vaccinations, it will impact, I think, our nurses in the work that they're doing in our schools, because it is a lot of work, as one can imagine.
So we can do a quick little synopsis of what the difference is too. So once you're fully vaccinated, if you are identified as a close contact, you do not need to quarantine. You are not part of test and stay. Test and stay is for unvaccinated people, so the test and stay numbers hopefully will go down. If you're fully vaccinated as a close contact, you need to monitor your symptoms, which everybody should be doing. You need to test between day 5 and day 7 after your last exposure. And you need to wear a mask indoors in public places until you have that negative test, or for the 14 days after your exposure. So those are the recommendations for a fully vaccinated close contact.
So a fully vaccinated student would, if considered a close contact, would still be notified that they were a close contact, and then would they have to do their own test, or can they go to the test and stay?
Right now, by the state guidelines, they cannot go to the test and stay, but I'm thinking, there's been talk about that. There's a lot of questions about that, due to now that we are vaccinating all of the people that test and stay was geared towards.
Right, okay.
So hopefully that will change. So right now it is getting your own test.
Okay.
PCR test between day 5 and day 7.
Good.
Thank you so much, Mary Ellen. We really appreciate the update.
All right, you're welcome.
Thank you.
So next, we're going to move to our transportation update. So Keith Lavoie, Director of Operations, is going to give us an update about routes and buses.
That's right. Well, thank you again for the opportunity. Like everyone knows, we did change our start time and a lot of our bus route configuration on September 1st of this year, and it continues to be something that we are working on daily. I can say since my last update that we have made dozens of efficiency improvements with different routes, some small, some larger, that has really helped. So I can report now that 90+% of our routes are consistently performing well, meaning that they're getting to school on time in the morning and getting to the schools in the afternoons within what we expected. However, there are still some outliers that we're working on, and currently we're actually working on one today with some adjustments that will hopefully improve that overall performance. So that continues to be something ongoing, and I hope to report back that we do take care of those outliers as best we can. The other thing we did since our last update is we've reached out to school bus consultants. That's the group that did the full report for us back in 2017. We've reached out to them and said, hey, listen, we did the start time adjustment. We now have a set of data. We'd like for you to take a look at it. Just so there's another set of eyes that says, are there things that we haven't considered that we should? So we are working with them to see what that proposal would look like and see if it's advantageous for us to take on. So that's kind of exciting and something that we can really dig our teeth into. The other thing, and this is good news, we've reported previously that we were investigating the option of dropping off Milliken Middle School students prior to going to Algonquin. We really dug deep into that, and we have a couple of buses that are trialing that through different neighborhoods as they meander their way across town to get to Algonquin. And we're hoping we have another set of that's ready, but it's going to take a communication plan to make sure we inform families and the schools of what to expect, and the drivers too, and whether or not that's really going to yield a benefit. So right now we're in kind of the planning phase of what the communication will look like, with the hope that after the holidays we can push go on it and see how that will improve. But we are expecting that a couple of dozen students will be impacted positively by that change. But we don't want the reverse to happen. Just like with any type of change, as soon as you push a play on something, you might have undone 5 things that were good. We want to make sure that we don't trigger anything like that. So that's going to be part of the work that we do over the next couple of weeks. The other thing I wanted to report, and this was something that has come up a couple of times, is considering splitting the bus fleet and having half the fleet take care of our Milliken students and half the fleet taking care of Algonquin. We did do a dive into that, and it doesn't look like it's advantageous for this school year to take that on. It would be a radical change that would upset a lot of things that we have been able to do positively. So that's something that we're going to look at carefully for the start of next year. So that's a lot of what's happening with the routes, and I'll be happy to answer questions about that before I talk about the new app.
Kelly?
So for the trials, the couple buses that you're trying it out with, dropping off first, are they getting to the high school much later than they would have prior to that?
They're
or
not.
no?
That's actually working pretty well. That's what we started with them.
Yeah.
Because we knew it wouldn't impact anything on the Algonquin end. So they are able to make those, and this was one of the reasons why that shift of 5 minutes
Yeah.
was so beneficial. And what made those possible, that they were able to get to Algonquin on time in the afternoon, which helped with the traffic pattern and everything else that happens there. So yes, we're hoping that this next set will do the same.
Okay.
So how many buses now are actually doing that?
2 buses
Okay,
are doing that with a selected number of stops,
okay,
not all stops.
okay.
So that's one of the other parts of it that's kind of confusing and upsetting to some, because why does he get to get off and I can't, type of thing. But we wanted to build that in, strategically.
Any other questions for Keith?
And you say that the buses are getting to the schools in a reasonable amount of time. What is kind of our
Window?
window?
Yeah, we like to see that a majority of the buses are within 15 minutes of
Okay.
the dismissal, and 20 is the max. And we're trying to reduce that as much as possible. Now, that doesn't also, there was a traffic light out in the center of town one day. That caused the delay. We've had a number of drivers out recently where we've had to do some doubling up, which has created some things to be later. So when we're able to get that consistency of what we were hoping to have on a regular day, that 20-minute mark is what we're aiming for.
Okay. And what do you think that was, say, a year ago or 2 years ago?
Similar, more maybe like in the 15-minute
Okay.
versus 20. That's what I've been reviewing and looking back at, like the 2018 numbers and things like that, when there was a deeper dive onto it.
I know that in the last, few weeks, I've seen, because I'm a parent pickup at Proctor, but I've seen the buses there, which earlier in the school year, there was no buses there at pickup, so.
Proctor's been one of the better performing schools.
Yeah.
Yep. For PM.
Yeah.
And AM, actually.
Yeah.
And are you're before Peasley. Peasley and Lincoln are together, correct?
Yeah.
Correct.
Because
Yeah.
I would say we're probably not seeing as good
You're not
as-
seeing the
yeah,
buses,
being the
yeah.
second.
Being the second
last
tier.
dismissal,
That
yeah.
is also correct.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else for Keith?
I can chat about the app for a little bit. I'll be very brief, but Where Is My Kid? I can't even believe I'm saying that out loud, is the name of the app. I've heard from a lot of families that it has relieved a lot of stress, certainly with the colder weather coming, getting some feedback, a lot of positive feedback. The negative feedback has been more around on the half-day schedule. They had to add a portion to the app, and we're working on that. We trialed it on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and it didn't work. So we're going back to the drawing board and trying to get it rectified for, the early dismissal day on December 23rd. So that's what we're working on right now. But the hope is if that is added, it will complement, on half days, people want to know where the bus is. So I think that's going to be really beneficial, because those days are awkward anyway.
I have a question about the app. I didn't sign
Go
up,
ahead.
obviously my kids aren't on the bus, but, so somebody I work with, they live on Lincoln Street, and they said, and I don't know if it was when it first rolled out, if there's been adjustment, I haven't followed up with them, but their app was going off, constantly getting alerts, because all buses were passing by their house, I don't know if that was
The
something that was adjusted or-
notifications have to be worked on.
Okay.
Like from
Is
the
that- so is
user
that-
end.
Okay.
Not on the app end. So people have to subscribe
Subscribe
to the
to
different,
certain things,
and make
okay.
adjustments to how
Yeah.
that, bubble around a
Yeah.
geolocation is adjusted.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's buses that may go through that window a couple times during the route.
Yeah.
So we're trying to work with the developer on trying to maybe identify a time where it
Yeah.
sends a message versus every time it goes in and out of an area. So
Yeah, 'cause
that's part of the development of the app that needs to improve.
Yeah, I live on Northgate, so I could imagine if I did have the app, it would probably be going off, like,
But the hope is that, you would not select every bus.
I
You would
wouldn't,
just
yeah.
select the bus
The
that
bus,
you
you have
needed.
to select,
However,
okay.
what we found is that if you have students in different schools that ride the different tiers,
Yeah.
that take multiple buses,
Yeah.
you might get a number of dings.
You would get, yeah.
Mhm.
So maybe there's a way that could be communicated to families. I don't know if it's through.
As I said, I don't know if it's a still issue. I just
Right.
remember the first rollout.
Okay.
It was like one of the first days, and so I haven't followed up to see if people are still having that problem, but I was like, oh.
Well, that's what I've hesitated. What people have been doing, and this is is they do have a dedicated email address that, and has been very responsive to people to kind of work on it individually. So if anyone does have a problem, and that's a good idea. We're probably due for sending something out to say, hey, listen, if you're having trouble with the app, do reach out, because they've been able to troubleshoot pretty quickly.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
been I've been very pleased with that.
Thank you. Thank
Welcome.
you for all of your work, and
No problem.
Jean as well. I know that she's been working overtime, so
She has.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Keith before we move on? All right, thank you, Keith.
Welcome.
We're going to move on to Agenda D, Superintendent's Report to the Committee, and we're going to start with enrollments. Thank you, Superintendent Martineau.
Sure. So in your packet is the enrollment report for November 22nd. And as of November 22nd, we had 1,536 students enrolled, and 4 students more than the prior months. We also received our Nasdaq enrollment projections, which are very important in terms of the budget process. And our projections for the 22-23 school year is 1,566 students, which is 30 more students than we currently have this year. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
All right, also in your packet is the FY22 monthly general fund expenditure report, and I will have Becky Pellegrino give an update.
So as I mentioned last month, we're carefully monitoring the Northborough operational budget. As of the 30th of November, we had $655,963 or 2.54 remaining on the bottom line. In comparison to where we were last year at this time, we had $584,699 or 2.34% remaining. So we do have slightly more than what we had last year at this time. We have received confirmation that 2 additional students will be placed in out-of-district settings at 2 collaborative programs at the beginning of 2022. So we will expect to see an impact to the budget of approximately $85,000 based on those placements. My team and I have closely worked over the past month to review any expenditures and to make any moves onto other sources of funds or grant funds, and that is reflected in the bottom line. We have chosen to keep the budget frozen at this time while we continue to monitor. As I said, we are closely watching all expenditures and having conversations at the administrative level about the Northborough FY22 budget.
Thank you. Questions for Becky? All right, at this time, I am going to be looking for a motion to approve the monthly general fund expenditure report as presented tonight until audited. Thank you, Keith.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the FY22 budget monthly general fund expenditure report as of November 30th, 2021 as presented.
Until?
Oh, until audited. Thank you.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? This will be a roll call vote. Mr. Lavelle?
Yes.
Ms. Tagliaferri?
Yes.
We don't need to do roll call vote. Sorry.
No.
All in favor? Excellent. It is approved unanimously. Thank you.
We were all just going with it.
We were.
I need to see my face to make sure.
So that brings us to, first of all, do you have anything else you'd like to present tonight, Becky?
That is it.
Great, thank you so much. So that brings us to our capital plan. Mr. Martineau.
Sure. So just a quick update about the FY23 through FY29 capital plan and what we're projecting as a capital project for FY23. So we've had conversations with Town Administrator John Kader, and the priority capital project will be the Proctor roof. So that is in need of replacement. We will also be submitting through MSBA Accelerated Repair Project a statement of interest for the roof. but also in conversations with the town administrator. I think he is on board and trying to fund that through a variety of funding sources through the town as well. And on a good news story, Assistant Superintendent Lavoie has a capital project, a small project to share, but a impactful project.
Yes, I do. Yes, so back in the spring, we identified that the way to get to one of the Peasley swing sets was not conducive for all students, and we want to make sure we made an adjustment as quickly as we possibly could. So this was a real opportunity to collaborate with our DPW and Student Support Services Department to make sure we were getting that accessibility for all students. So we did launch a project over the summer that totaled in cost of $9,880, which did come from our facilities rental revolving account. And as a result, it now makes all of our playgrounds at all the schools with equal access. So like I mentioned, this was a genuine collaboration. I do want to give a huge thank to Scott Charpentier, the DPW director. He helped us navigate this from a variety of different perspectives. And when we were able to share a picture of a student that was able to get the access swinging in a swing, it made his year. And I have documented proof that he feels that way. So this was a project that took place in the fall, and it did disrupt the Peasley School. I want to compliment Principal Coakley and her staff for navigating that, and it continues. It's fully operational now. Things are great, but during that process, the asphalt didn't smell good. And of course, it was an 85-degree day, and you know what happens with that. So I'm pleased to show some of the photographs of the finished product. This is looking out one of the back entrances and the pathway down. The thing that's most noticeable about this is we really had to take into account the pitch of the land. This picture really doesn't do it justice. It looks very flat here. It is not, I promise you. So the grade had to be considered, and that's why it's got kind of a yellow brick road feature to it of heading down to the playground. So there's one angle.
Was that all grass between the
That was all grass.
path to the playground?
It was, yes. So where you see the sawhorses
Yeah.
all the way down to the playground area was grass. And I can say through this and through some creative bulldozing, we were able to reduce the pitch of that hill. So it made it at a less of a grade. So this is just what happened during construction. The kids were marveled by this. I think operations of those classrooms were quite next to it. I got an experience with the bulldozer. And this is just it from another angle, more from the basketball court slide. But, huge. I mean, these things get underestimated of how pivotal they are for kids and for a facility, and we were just happy to get this opportunity to get it done.
So was there always the swing there, the I don't know what they call them, like the blue
Accessible
swing,
swing,
accessible
yeah.
swing. So,
Yeah.
Yes.
so the accessible
adaptive
swing was there.
Adaptive.
You just couldn't get there.
Correct.
Not easily.
Not easily.
Yes.
There was a lot
All
of
terrain-
creative
all-terrain
creative
wheels and
ways
stuff.
of making
Yes,
that happen, but,
off-roading.
Yeah.
to making sure that the students safe and the staff are safe and everything else, this was a needed improvement, and I'm glad we were able to get it done.
I'm not very familiar with this building. It's very helpful to get filled in
I
on
thought
it.
the pictures would be helpful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. If he had just spoken about it.
That wouldn't have helped. And it doesn't do justice just to
No, but I follow. You can tell how much grading was done by how much grass was impacted.
correct.
So I can kind of gauge just from that.
And will this area be cleared of snow when it snows?
Yes, it will.
Awesome. Cool.
So,
That was a wonderful update.
yes, it's a good one.
Thank
And
you
it was
for
a beautiful
sharing
day.
that,
I got,
Pete.
yeah, you got it.
And thank you to Scott Charpentier for his partnership
I was
as well.
definitely going to echo that. He was hugely helpful.
All right, so that brings us to our budget goals. So our final FY23 budget goals are in our packet. Greg, did you have anything else you wanted to add about that?
No, I think the FY23 budget goals and FY23 budget calendar are part of the preliminary budget presentation, so we
Oh,
can
perfect.
move right past those.
Excellent.
It's the will of the committee.
Absolutely.
All right.
So let's begin our preliminary budget presentation.
Is that in here too, Greg, or no? Not the actual thing, right?
Is that?
Your
presentation.
slide's not in here, right?
No.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to.
All right, so I'm pleased to share with the school committee and the community the FY 2023 preliminary budget. And just a couple updates. On November 9th, the Northborough Operational Budget Subcommittee met to discuss the upcoming budget landscape and context. And again, on November 23rd, the entire school committee met in a special meeting to discuss again the budget in preparation for the presentation this evening. So in terms of our budget, when we think about the budget process, it's really about what we're trying to accomplish in terms of work with our students. And what drives that work is our strategic plan, Vision 2026, and specifically our mission and vision. So our mission is simple, but I think powerful: to educate, inspire, and challenge all students. And then in terms of the vision, so the work that we did around the portrait of the graduate, I'm really making sure students are prepared for the next grade level, transition to schools, or transition to college or career, that they're collaborators, critical and creative thinkers, communicators, socially and civically engaged, growth-oriented, healthy, and balanced. So in terms of the budget process, I'm pleased to share that we are on target in terms of key milestones and dates. Under the leadership of Becky, the finance team is constantly in many fiscal years. So as they exit one fiscal year, they're launching another and then thinking about the next fiscal year. So the budget process begins in September. And really that work centers around thinking about budget goals and priorities. In October, principals lead the work at the building level in terms of thinking about what types of budget requests and what type of goals they want to accomplish. And then that information is shared with the financial team, and under Becky's leadership, that information is synthesized and a preliminary budget is created. And then approving budget goals, thinking about the capital plan is the work that's conducted by the school committee. And I think operational budget subcommittee meetings, so a lot happens between the months of September and November to get this to this point this evening to present a preliminary budget. I will highlight a couple other key milestone dates. The presentation by the town administrator to all boards, the financial trend monitoring meeting. I have not yet received confirmation about the exact date, but I do anticipate it will be on December 20th. And I believe it will be held virtually, but as soon as I receive confirmation, I will send the committee information, more detailed information. And then lastly, in terms of January, presenting the superintendent's recommended budget will happen at the January meeting. And so between now and January, there's a lot more conversations and discussions with the district leadership team, principals, and teachers around what are the goals we're trying to accomplish with the fiscal year 23 budget. So in terms of budget variables for FY23, one of the variables that we don't know is Chapter 70 funding, and specifically additional funding we may receive from the Student Opportunity Act, specifically around transportation reimbursement for out-of-district students. We did see last year in FY22 funding from the Student Opportunity Act, and we anticipate an increase in that funding in FY23. Out-of-district special education funding is also an unknown at this point in time, and it does fluctuate and vary depending on the governor's budget, so we're waiting for those numbers. And lastly, inflation is something that we are concerned about as we look to FY23. The costs of goods and services, we are seeing an impact to our FY22 budget, and we do anticipate that to continue in FY23, so it's something we're monitoring closely. So in terms of the work that we do as a leadership team, we do use the school committee approved budget goals as important goals to think about as we move the budget process forward. Last year, the school committee did spend a lot of time aligning its budget goals to the strategic plan, Vision 2026. And there were a few minor changes, and one note is that we did remove achieve full day tuition-free full day K, so that is not on here. That was accomplished. But the goals center around recruiting, maintaining, and supporting high-quality staff, meeting the needs of all learners with instructional classroom models that are research-based, reflective of best practices, and support class student-teacher ratios in accordance with the class size policy. Expand professional development for all teachers, maintaining the district's capital assets, maintaining and supporting instructional technology, as well as ensuring all students are provided with equity of opportunity. And again, these are important goals as we go through the budget process and have to prioritize requests. These help us fine-tune and think about what we're trying to accomplish. So where we are in terms of the budget number at this point in time. So the FY22 budget was $25,799,678. From all the requests from directors and principals, the initial budget request came in at $28,826,845, which represented 11.73% increase over fiscal year 22, which is not atypical of what we see from the initial request from directors and principals. Part of the work that we do as a leadership team is really thinking about what if there were no fiscal constraints, what we want to see in terms of the asks for the budget. So again, this is typically the greatest percentage we'll see in the entire budget process. The finance team and the leadership team did look at those requests, and we were able to identify a little under $2 million of reductions, which brought the preliminary budget down to $26,934,864, which represents a 4.4% increase over FY22. So in terms of where we're seeing the increases for fiscal year 2023, we did see an increase in contracted custodial cleaning services. We did go out for a new contract, and we saw a $37,000 increase. Technology infrastructure and maintenance and support, again, we saw some increases in some of our licenses as well as some of our needs. Out-of-district collaboratives and tuitions, we did see an increase of $192,393, which is a significant increase over fiscal year 22. But I will share that the collaborative is a much better value and sometimes a better placement for our students because it's closer and it's less expensive than some of our private tuition-based programs that we have. So we did see a shift in a reduction of our private tuition-based programs to our collaborative tuitions. And then lastly, we're in year 3, entering year 3 of a 3-year contract with our associations. And the salary increases and the COLAs represent a little under $900,000 of increases. So the total increases we're seeing are $1,135,186. So some of the budget offsets, so we were able to apply our FY22 circuit breaker special education reimbursement, which is $1,185,267, as well as the money that we received for out-of-district transportation. This is the first year of the funding of Student Opportunity Act, which was a little under $34,000. So the budget offsets are a little over $1.2 million. So at this point in time of the budget process, we have a lot more work to do moving forward. But the preliminary FY23 budget is at $26,934,864, which reflects a 4.4% increase over FY22. So the next step is, again, to work as a leadership team to think about where we want to go in terms of budget requests. What we do not know at this point in time are potential retirements. And again, those are the discussions and information that we'll receive over the next 4 to 6 weeks. So I do want to point out that in the budget requests by our building principals and directors, there were a number of positions that were requested that are not included in this preliminary budget. The total number of positions equaled 8.2 FTEs. And what we're doing now as a leadership team is really prioritizing these positions and really thinking about if we can only request, 1 or 2 new positions, what would they be? And those conversations are underway. But I do know that the school committee did prioritize elementary strings program as a budget priority. So again, we did list that as a top priority based on some of the input and feedback we received at the operational budget subcommittee and the special meeting that we did have. And lastly, I'll just share with you kind of a historical context of percent increases. So over the past 5 years, you can see that we've requested pretty modest budget increases, with the ceiling budget increase being 3.5% in FY19. And you can see in FY21, as we were entering into the pandemic, we asked for a 1% increase, and then FY22 was a 2.4% increase, 4.7% increase. And then as we move into FY23, conversations that we've had with Town Administrator John Cadero, we're targeting a 3% increase. That's kind of the target that we've been given as a district and as a school committee. So I'd be happy to answer questions, but I guess we're still early on in the budget process. I think we have a great start and many more conversations to have as a leadership team, and thinking about what goals we'd like to try to accomplish through the budget process.
Thank you. Kelly? This is great. I mean, I've said it before, you guys put so much work and effort into it, and you never stop. As you said, the budget year just keeps going and going. Something that came up after the last meeting that we had, when you presented the preliminary thing, and community it always comes up, even though we're 2 separate districts, Northborough and Southborough. It always comes up like, well, they have this and we don't have that, and why do they have this and why do we have this and all that. Obviously, I'm not asking for a presentation on it tonight, but that might be something in the future to talk about how our budgets, even though we are separate and we shouldn't be compared, but because we filter into the same area, if there could be some explanation to community people who haven't been following from year to year, why there are certain decisions made and who makes the decisions, and some people will be like, oh, well, they cut the music program, and it wasn't like it was just done overnight. It was like an overall type thing. So something like that to keep in mind for the future and stuff and things, because as you can see with the budgets, and you mentioned the cost of living, the COLA, when it goes up. That's going up. That's a standard going up, with contracts. So, we have to work with all the rest of the money for everything that we need. So.
Yeah, I think the reality is what's good for Southborough is good for Northborough, and what's good for Northborough is good for Southborough. Mm-hmm. So those are the types of internal conversations we're having around, okay, what resources do we have in Southborough that we don't have in Northborough? And conversely, we're having the same conversation with Southborough around what do we have in Northborough that we should be thinking about in Southborough. And I will share one of the conversations we've been having really center around thinking about instructional technology specialists. We have those positions in Southborough. We don't. we used to, but we don't currently at the elementary level in Northborough. So we're having a lot of internal dialogue around how can we create parity, so that, again, students have similar types of access to experiences and opportunities. So I think it's a great point. It's something that we can, as we move forward, we can add some additional information to present to the committee around what are some of the things that Northborough has that Southborough doesn't have, and what are some of the things Southborough has in terms of resources that Northborough doesn't have at this point in time. And I just also forgot to mention that, the great work that Becky and the finance team does. I think you're absolutely right. They live in many financial years and do an excellent job balancing the process, and also keeping in mind that it's not really about the money. It's really about what are we trying to accomplish through the vehicle of these dollars. So that's always at the forefront of the finance team's work, which isn't always the case in every district I've worked at.
Anyone else have any comments or questions? Keith or Erin? I have a couple of comments. So first of all, no surprise here, but obviously I'm very excited to see that the elementary strings .4 position is something that's being considered. I was on the music task force that was spearheaded by Rhoda, and that was definitely something that was part of our recommendation, is to include a strings program at the elementary level in Northborough. I'm curious about the FTE requests. I mean, as a teacher myself, I think that one thing that makes a school and a district really work so well is the people who are working in the buildings. And when you have that position that's cut or that you desire, and you don't have the people resources to serve the students, that's really where people get stressed and tapped out. And so seeing all those positions, it's like, wow, what if we could really hire all of those people? Realistically, probably not. But so, thinking back to Stephanie, your presentation about, some of our potential loss on learning, especially in math. We saw the student growth percentile is pretty drastic there. I would think maybe our math interventionists or math educator might be prioritized, but it would be interesting to hear from the teachers and the principals themselves on, what do you need in order to support your students for, the following years. I did have one question about the budget and buses for next year. So I know that we have had some discussion about, if, Keith, all of the best laid plans that you have don't quite, make everyone happy this year, and we have to add new buses, how will that impact our plans for our next budget?
Yeah, so one of the challenges is that a single bus isn't going to really impact the overall operation. So, it's about $80,000 for a single bus.
Mm-hmm.
So if you multiply that out, then obviously, you have 3 buses, it's 80 times 3. I am very confident that working with the bus consultants and taking the lessons that we've learned this year, that we'll be in a really great place coming into this fall. We took on a lot. We made a lot of changes and a lot of shifts, and although not perfect, and there are spots that we still need to work on, it's in a place where I feel very confident moving forward that I don't need to recommend adding buses for next year.
Okay, thank you.
Keith, do you want to?
No, I would say the same. I think we're, really in the middle of that data review, and like with anything small or large, considering the buses, we want to make sure we're taking it from all angles. And I agree 100% with Greg. Adding a bus, or even 2, may not alleviate anything that we're seeing as a negative thing. But maybe also, the making sure that the buses are running efficiently as possible is really where we're going to get those gains and learn a lot from this year. So there are things we want to explore.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you so much, Greg, for that presentation. And in the coming months, we'll definitely be seeing that change. So next up is our school committee member reports. So anyone from committees or liaisons have anything they'd like to report? Do you have an NSPAC update? Thank you, Kelly. How did I know that was coming?
Well, today I saw some of the people sitting here at the table at a great meeting. It was with Megan Kelty, the ELA coordinator, and she presented on literacy screening for dyslexia and things like that in our district. And it was a really great meeting. On their website, they have, I'm looking at it right now, they've already posted the meeting from it, the recorded meeting from it. So I highly encourage anybody to go to nspac.org and check it out on their events. It's under their past events, and then they post everything for it. So it's very informational and a nice resource type thing information to find out from it. Upcoming events for them on January 25th. They have a transition planning workshop, and it's presented with the district's coordinator to help parents understand transition process from the high school and special ed students. So there'll be a registration posting for that soon. And I think that's about it.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelly. I have just a few updates. So the Coalition for Equity met last month. And so we're brainstorming how to engage with the community. And so that's sort of our goal for this year. The policy subcommittee met last week, and Erin and I sit on that. So we mainly talked about our public comments or audience sharing policy that we're in the middle of drafting, as well as some other more HR-related policies. So stay tuned on more for that. For the Town of Northborough's Committee for Diversity and Inclusion, we're in the process of finalizing our recommendations for the Board of Selectmen, which will happen in January, so we'll give that presentation. And I did want to update you that part of our recommendation as of right now is most likely going to be that that number one, to make the Diversity and Inclusion a permanent advisory committee to the Board of Selectmen. So this was just a one-year committee, but to make it permanent. But then number two, also to actually not have a school committee representative. And there was a lot of discussion around that, partially because as the school committee representative who was sitting on the committee this year, I really didn't have to put on my school committee hat that much. I put on my Coalition for Equity hat a lot. And so the recommendation draft that we have been discussing will probably include a Coalition for Equity member, which could be a school committee member, and as well as an administrator from the district. So I just wanted to update you so that if you have any feedback on that, you could certainly provide that. Any feedback?
So there's the two. There's the one that the school has.
That's the Coalition for Equity.
And then
This
there's
is
the one, the
town.
town one.
Right.
So they're wanting to extend the town one
Exactly.
and have that, but not have
Not-
specific school committee member as a representative on thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, you were telling me that a lot of the stuff, because they originally, when you originally went there, they are like, oh, the school has their own thing. Oh, so we don't need to talk about the schools. And so that was kind
Right.
of like a thing, kind of.
Exactly,
like-
and that was part of our conversation
Yeah.
is, where does the town and the school sort of combine and collaborate? And also, is the town's Committee for Diversity and Inclusion centered around only the schools? Because a lot of our conversation was sort of only on the schools, but we were having all this work done at the coalition. And so I think having that coalition representative to sort of bridge the two groups is going to be really key. And that's something that, again, I was bringing my knowledge from the coalition every single meeting. I really was not bringing anything new from our school committee meetings, so it didn't really seem like it was necessary.
Yep.
If that makes any sense.
Yep.
Yeah, this is more of an endpoint, not a source of data for that conversation
Right.
specifically. It's not the specialty of this committee.
Exactly.
Have they talked about just combining the two groups so that we're not like repeating work and just having one that includes the school and the towns and?
That's complicated because I think that the work is a little bit different.
Different,
I think
okay.
that the goals are different.
Okay.
I don't know if you have anything that you want to add to that.
No, I
Greg.
think that they should be separate.
Okay.
As long as there is that bridge, there is that continuity of, for example, our work this year is around community outreach. And I think some of the work that the town is looking to do is community outreach. So if we have that person who sits on both, that person can unite and be the bridge.
Okay.
So those are my updates. Any other updates for school committee member reports? All right, so we're going to move to educational policy. There is no educational policy at this time.
I have a question. So
Yes.
for the policies, have we met just as Northborough alone, or are they only the combined ones this year so far? Only the combined?
Yes, so that was a change this
Yeah.
year, sort of to streamline the process.
Yeah.
So that.
It's working out well,
It
having
is.
it all.
It really is.
And we'll bring
For you.
policies at the combined meeting in December.
There's also no policies tonight to distribute. So that brings us to the personnel report. Greg?
Sure, so in your packet is the personnel report as of December 1st, and a few changes. I will point out that Michelle Moody has taken on a new role in Southborough as the team chairperson. And then we have a custodian who has moved to the Malkin Middle School. And then we've had one resignation, so a lot of movement for this time of year. But again, this looks like a more typical personnel report for the month of December than what we've seen in the past many months with COVID-19.
Thank you. So that brings us to communications. There's none at this time. So we'll move on to action on the minutes. So we do, in your packet, have the open meeting minutes of November 3rd, 2021. So I am looking for a motion to approve these minutes.
I can make a motion to approve the Northborough School Committee open meeting minutes. It was a virtual meeting on Wednesday, November 3rd, 2021.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed?
Just abstain.
And all those abstained. Perfect. Thank you. So we have 3 for approve and 1 for abstain, so it is approved. So future agenda items that we'll talk about include the recommended budget presentation for FY23 with some updates, as well as an English learners presentation. Anything else that you would like to add to our future agenda items?
Is there, in January, is there a school?
Z School.
Yes, so Z School will be presenting, and
Z is in January.
So the PTO presentation?
so Amy will be back. Is that, no, February?
No, I'm February.
Yes, so Mary.
Okay.
So I think.
So then Peasley is January?
Okay. There was some confusion
Yes,
about that.
So I think, and I'll have Cheryl send out
Okay.
the update, but I do think Peasley will be presenting, or Dr. Coakley will be presenting
In January?
in January with
Okay.
the Peasley PTO.
Okay.
And then Amy will be back in February with Z's PTO.
Okay.
Okay.
Excellent.
Yep.
I feel like we'll probably want to hear from Mary Ellen again.
Never get sick of my
So I think that Mary Ellen, get ready, you might just have a standing line item on our agenda. Exactly. Anything else?
Just what I mentioned about a future idea, and again, it doesn't have to be next month but some sort of comparison or some sort of
Sure.
district outlining, or maybe a refresher to the community of why, and the committee, because not all of us have been here. Joan's not here, so I can say, actually, none of us have been here for as long as some of the decisions have made historically in our
And
district and
I guess
stuff,
my
so.
question for you would be, do you think that would be helpful for operational budget subcommittee? Or do you think it would be helpful for an entire committee?
The only reason why I would say an entire committee presentation would just because it gets more coverage for the community for televised reasons versus that. Again, it's not something that necessarily has to be done next month, but just thinking
Sure.
ahead.
Sure. Thank you.
But again,
I guess I do have one communication that I could share. So that is the work that we're moving forward around kind of studying school configurations and potential opportunities. So I think as part of that work, it's really an investigation of how can we best use our resources in our community of Northborough. And the question around, are the current grade configurations maximizing our resources, and if not? And part of that work will be studying what other communities do. And one of the communities that we'll study is Southborough, because they have a different grade level configuration. And as a result, we can start looking at how they use resources compared to how Northborough can use resources. So I do think it ties in.
Yeah, so that could tie in with the, and that's when it might
Yep.
fit into that presentation and exploration and thing, exactly, versus having to have something separate.
Did you get a subcommittee for that?
Yeah, so I do have an email to be sent out on Friday around inviting people to join. So we had much interest, plenty of people who want to volunteer, which is good.
Good.
And a good cross-representation of the different key stakeholders. So I will be sharing a timeline and a meeting schedule with those folks this Friday.
And refresh my memory, does one of us sit on that committee? Yes.
Yeah.
Do we have someone chosen yet?
I think I volunteered.
Kelly,
If-
thank you.
Unless somebody else wants.
Thank you, Kelly.
I know.
It's all you.
I think you understand the neighborhood model well and representing the school committee side of
Yeah.
I'll be your backup.
what
if
it
you need a
means,
backup.
Yeah,
you know,
sounds good.
operationally
Excellent.
and budgetarily, so go for it.
All right, so we have been doing the approval of bills and payrolls electronically. And that brings us to audience sharing. I don't see anyone new in the audience. Last call. All right, so that brings us to the end of our meeting. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Kelly?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Second from Erin. All in favor?
Just a quick question.
Oh, yes.
The combined is on the 15th,
Yes.
and
Oh.
it's, do we know what
Don't know.
time, where, and format, or not
So
yet?
I'm meeting with Joan and Paul
Okay.
on Friday morning. My prediction is it will be virtual because of the number of committee members and being able to facilitate 20 members in a room will be difficult.
Is the time under discussion, or is that likely known?
So the current time is 6 p.m.
That's the normal,
Um,
that's the
Sometimes
default.
they've moved it to 5:30.
Yeah,
okay.
Sometimes.
My goal is to make sure we have a very realistic and time-bound agenda. And I think after meeting with Joan and Paul on Friday, I'll have a better sense. But based on what I'm seeing as the agenda topics, I think we can achieve that goal of having a meeting at 6 p.m.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Any further discussion?
It'll be 100% virtual versus, because I think last time it was like a hybrid.
It will be either or.
Okay. So it'll be a hybrid or, okay.
It'll be either
No,
You don't want the
either
worst
or.
of both worlds.
virtual, most likely.
I would say
Most
either-
likely it'll be virtual.
I got what you're
Either
saying.
in-person.
We
Yeah.
won't do the hybrid option like the
Right.
last, yeah.
Right.
Because
It creates more
as
challenges than it
As
solves.
nice as it was, it seemed very challenging.
Yep, it is.
You know, it seemed very challenging. It was hard for me to hear, you know.
The owl will be lonely.
Yeah.
All right, we're ready to take a vote. All those in favor of adjourning? Excellent. We are adjourned at 8:15 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.